Despite a continuation of COVID-19 measures aimed at safeguarding staff and resulting in curbing of activities at the Office of the Parliament, work continued as usual. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of the happenings for 2021. The 18th National Youth Parliament held its first sitting on January 11th. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, the sitting was not held in the parliamentary chamber, as is customary, and instead incorporated virtual technology in a hybrid sitting. Because it was not possible to conduct the usual training sessions, this year's edition featured National Youth Parliament alumni as participants. The private motion moved by Leader of the Opposition and Member of Parliament for Siparia, Mr. Aswad Harvey, called on the government to implement new strategies for bridging the digital divide in Trinidad and Tobago. Best debater went to Kaleem Ali, the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West and Minister of National Security.
Now, Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, the motion neglects the fact that between 2018 and 2019 alone, there was a 30% increase in access to mobile devices, which, as the Minister of Finance would have just indicated, would be furthered by the removal of taxes on the importation of these devices. Mr. Speaker, that answers the opposition leader's question as to who these strategies that the governments have undertaken benefits. It benefits everyone. Now, Mr. Speaker, between January 2019 and 2020 as well, there was a 0.3%, which may sound nominal, but is in fact significant in the increase of internet within households in Trinidad and Tobago, translating to more than 3,741 households being connected to the internet. Now, Mr. Speaker, this motion that its entire debate is based on is clearly flawed, and it makes me wonder as to whether or not the same level of research went into the strategies that the opposition now seeks to impose on the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the People's Republic of China to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency Fang Ki, paid a courtesy call on the presiding officers of the Parliament. President of the Senate, the Honourable Christine Kangaloo, and Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bridget Anisette George MP, received His Excellency on January 13th at the Red House. His Excellency signed the visitor's book, after which gifts of appreciation were exchanged. He said the friendship between China and Trinidad and Tobago has a long history, and the cooperation between the two countries has continued to deepen, especially in the face of COVID-19, where China and Trinidad and Tobago have worked together to fight the pandemic. The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association hosted its post-election seminar for new and returning elected parliamentarians from the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago for 3 days on February 22nd, 24th and March 1st. The aims of the seminar included giving new and returning parliamentarians an in-depth understanding of parliamentary practice and procedure and the skills to legislate, scrutinize, provide oversight and represent their communities to the highest standard. Giving members of the Parliament and officials an understanding of the CPA and relevant networks, including its purpose, values and opportunities. And training parliamentarians to be able to identify examples and adopt good practices to better help them maintain a high standard of delivering their parliamentary responsibilities. International Women's Day is celebrated annually at the Office of the Parliament. The United Nations theme for 2021 was Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. This year, female and frontline workers in teaching, manufacturing, healthcare and national security was celebrated. The Rotunda Gallery at the Red House also marked the occasion with an exhibition featuring female-themed artwork and by female artists. The President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives toured the exhibition, which lasted for 1 month. The Office of the Parliament was thrown into mourning with the sudden passing of Leader of Government Business, Senator the Honourable Franklin Khan, on April 17th. The Parliament opened a public condolences book which was signed by Her Excellency President Paula May Weeks, Mr. Khan's fellow current and past parliamentarians, the Mayor of Port of Spain and members of the public. Also paying their respects were various ambassadors, including those from the United States, the United Kingdom, Jamaica, and Venezuela. At the time of his death, Senator Khan was the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. Mr. Khan was first elected as the Member of Parliament for Ottawa-Mayaro in 2002. Commonwealth Day 2021 was marked with a virtual symposium on agriculture. On April 21st, attendees met under the theme Delivering a Common Future, Connecting, Innovating, Transforming. Panelists included the ministers in the Ministry of Agriculture, along with representatives from the UE Faculty of Food and Agriculture and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, along with business people, Ms. Nikita Lagol of Agro-Caribbean and Mr. Alpha Senan, founder and director of Y Farm. The symposium targeted young people with an interest in agriculture. Attendees were allowed to ask questions on anything related to agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. The Joint Select Committee on the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2020 held a series of public consultations in Tobago between April 30th and May 4th. The meetings were to get the public's comments on the proposed companion bills drafted to accord self-government to Tobago, the Draft Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill, and the Draft Tobago Island Administration Bill. For 3 days, the committee sat at the Victor E. Bruce Complex for virtual sessions and met with specially invited stakeholders and members of the public to hear their views on the draft proposals in the bill. On June 9th, Mr. Rajmanlal Joseph, as appointed by President and Commander-in-Chief of the Republic, Her Excellency Pauline Weeks, took the oath of office as Ombudsman for Trinidad and Tobago. The Ombudsman is an officer of Parliament, and as such, Mr. Joseph took the oath of office at the Red House before the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bridget Anisette George MP. He was then presented with his instruments of appointment before entering upon the duties of the office. A notable moment when the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Cannabis Control Bill 2020 was laid in the House of Representatives on June 9th. The committee conducted an extensive inquiry before the report was compiled and presented for debate. The report focused on the history of the consideration of cannabis legislation by Parliament, the purpose of the proposed bill, the functions of the proposed Trinidad and Tobago Cannabis Licensing Authority, and other key provisions. On July 27th, the Office of the Parliament remembered those that died during the attempted coup d'etat of 1990 with the annual wreath-laying ceremony. Participating in the event were President of the Republic, Her Excellency Pauline Weeks, President of the Senate, the Honourable Christine Kangaloo, Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bridget Anisette George, along with citizens, some of whom were themselves held hostage on that fateful day, like activist Mr. Wendell Eversley. On that same day, July 27th, Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the United Nations, New York, His Excellency Dennis Francis, paid a courtesy call on Speaker of the House of Representatives. Ambassador Francis, who has considerable experience in international relations and diplomacy, having worked for 38 years as a career diplomat at the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs until his retirement in 2016, received his instruments of appointment just 2 months prior. On July 14th, the Office of the Parliament began virtual tours for the first time. In light of the restrictions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Office of the Parliament moved to virtual chamber tours for the annual July-August vacation period. Every Wednesday and Thursday till September 2nd, children and adults were given access to free online guided tours of the Houses of Parliament, along with tidbits of the history of Parliament and their parliamentarians. The Parliament Channel celebrated 15 years of operation on August 18th. On that day in 2006, the Parliament televised its first live feed of a sitting of the House via its own television channel, available to cable subscribers in Trinidad. Soon after, the channel was added to the cable lineup in Tobago, and in November of 2007, the Parliament began broadcasting its proceedings via radio on the frequency 105.5 FM. The implementation of the Parliament Channel has given more transparency to the proceedings and work of our Parliament and the persons entrusted with our democracy. In recognition of the country's 59th independence anniversary, the Rotunda Gallery at the Red House featured a digital catalogue of artwork from artists working in the public sector who are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Staff of the Parliament were also invited to submit artwork for the exhibition, which was themed Two Islands, One Nation, a celebration of independence. Some 21 artists with a combined 28 art pieces were featured in the digital catalogue on the Rotunda Gallery's Facebook page. The Executive Committee of the Trinidad and Tobago branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association held its fourth meeting virtually on September 21st. The Executive Committee promotes understanding and cooperation for common purposes between those engaged in the parliamentary government of member and non-member Commonwealth countries by exchanging information and visits, and for the organization of conferences between Commonwealth members. Members of the Trinidad and Tobago Committee are Mrs. Christine Kangaloo, Chairman, Mrs. Bridget Anisette George, Vice Chairman, with members Mrs. Camille Robinson Regis, Mrs. Elisa Morris Julian, Mr. Roger Monroe, Miss Yokima Bethelme, Mr. Barry Padarath, Mr. Wade Mark, and Mrs. Chari Strott Sipasad. The second session of the 12th Republican Parliament was opened with simultaneous sittings of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The presidential proclamation was read declaring the Red House as the place where parliamentary sittings were to be held for this session. Members of each house were reminded of the precautionary measures implemented in the chambers for the COVID-19 pandemic. In the House of Representatives, the Minister of Finance announced the date for the presentation of the 2022 fiscal year budget estimates. October started with the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Colm Imbert, presenting the budget estimates for 2022 on October 4th in the Appropriation Financial Year 2022 Bill 2021 in the House of Representatives. The estimated total revenue was $43.33 billion, while the total estimated expenditure was $52.429 billion, causing a deficit of $9.096 billion. Estimates were calculated using oil and gas prices at US $65 a barrel and US $3.75 per MMBTU, respectively. The budget bill was passed in the lower house on Friday 15th October and introduced in the Senate on Monday 18th. It was debated and was passed on Wednesday 20th October. On the 27th of October, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honourable Bridget Anisette George, presented in a webinar hosted by the Caribbean Development Bank in collaboration with the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, the Parliament of Barbados, Dodds Group Limited UK, and the Caribbean Centre for Development Administration. Madam Speaker presented on the topic, "What About Us? National Budgeting for Constituents, Citizens and Every Woman, Man and Child." The webinar series on public expenditure scrutiny was open to members of Parliament in the Caribbean Development Bank's 19 borrowing member countries. The Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, supported by the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, hosted the first sitting of the Young Women in Leadership on November 22nd. The virtual debate saw young women who reside in Trinidad and Tobago between the ages of 18 and 25 years debate a bill to make provision for the prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace and for related matters. The mover of the motion was Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Celine Jagannath.
Madam Speaker, this government has always been committed to the principles of inclusiveness and equality, as evidenced by our adoption of international agreements such as CEDAW in 1989, the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995, and the ILO Convention 190 in 2019. Madam Speaker, the need to hold steadfast to these mandates, and more importantly, our duty to protect our working citizens, is amplified by the economic burdens, increased vulnerabilities, and social barriers resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. This bill affirms our commitment to extensive social protection of the working citizens in this country in an intersectional and inclusive manner that advances gender equity and gender justice.
The Young Women in Leadership program is a core component of the Caribbean Women in Leadership and Parl-Americas project, strengthening women's political leadership in the Caribbean, which is funded by Global Affairs Canada. On Monday, 29th November, the first sitting of the 19th National Youth Parliament was held in a hybrid setting. The private motion for debate was on the implementation of a mandatory vaccination policy in secondary schools and workplaces. The leader of the opposition and Member of Parliament for Superior, Calvin Sipasad, was the mover of the motion. At the end of debate, the motion calling on the government to implement mandatory vaccination policy in secondary schools and workplaces was defeated. Best debater went to Janae Campbell, member for Shogunas West, representing the Tobago Youth Council.
So what do? We have exhausted all other strategies. We have tried FAQs. We have tried using press conferences to educate the population on vaccination, all to no avail. So are we going to continue trotting along this onerous path of developing more marketing and educational strategies? As Nisha rightfully said, that making any sense? Madam Speaker, now is the time for us to try something new. With all, the AG conveyed that such a mandate can be classified as derogation of our human rights. However, to me, that sentiment depicts the epitome of hypocrisy. Isn't it not this same government that passed a state of emergency that began on May the 15th and only ended on November the 17th, 2021? What about our freedoms then? It seems to me like the AG knows about derogation conveniently, but moreover, it is important for us to remember that policies need to be adapted based on national development as opposed to personal gratification.
In December, Speaker of the House, the Honorable Bridget Anisette George, received two courtesy calls. The first was from the newly appointed Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, His Excellency Raphael Vaga van Kibet. His Excellency signed the visitor's book, and him and Madam Speaker exchanged gifts as tokens of appreciation. The second visit was by His Excellency Dongil Oh, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea. During the meeting, His Excellency also signed the visitors' books and gifts were exchanged. Both ambassadors expressed delight at being in Trinidad and Tobago and pledged to uphold the cordial relations between both countries. And that's a roundup of the major highlights at the Office of the Parliament for 2021. From all of us here at the Office of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, we wish you a bright and prosperous 2022.